hear from you, Margaret. Claire, thank you very much. I can't even begin to tell you how impactful that was. But now let's shift to see and hear from our unbelievable and talk about an incredible transformation story from Margaret Dennis, Becoming Unshakeable, her journey from fear to empowerment. In 2008, Margaret Dennis faced the unbearable loss of her 3-day-old son, twin to her daughter, Lily. This devastating experience plunged her into the depths of grief, where she confronted her deepest fears and unearthed layers of trauma. Within her pain, she discovered an unshakable inner strength that ignited her life's purpose: to guide other women through their grief, freeing them from the chains of their past and allowing them to rediscover joy. Today, Margaret stands as the driving force behind EVOLV Coaching, serving as CEO and founder. She is a TEDx speaker, an educator, a writer, and a certified Dare to Declare vision board facilitator, all while indulging in her funky shoe addiction. So fun. Please help me welcome the amazing Margaret Dennis.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you very much to both Jamie and Cheryl for putting this event on today and giving us this opportunity to speak. It's been an incredible journey. So thank you so much. I would like to invite all of you to close your eyes for a few minutes. And I want to take you on a bit of a journey. I want you to imagine that there's a little girl. She is 6 years old, and she is full of life. She is full of wonder and super excited about everything that's going on in her life. She's happy, she's secure, she's grounded. She has a beautiful life, parents who love her, a brother who bugs her, which is normal, and she loves school. And one day, this little girl in her little blonde pigtails and blue shirt and red shorts heads off to school, excited to play with her friends. And when she gets there, the mean girl, the leader of their friend group, looks at her and says, "You can't play with us anymore today. We don't like you. You're ugly. You have to go play by yourself." This little girl is devastated. She doesn't know what she did wrong. Why do they not like me today? Is it the shirt I wore? Did I say something wrong? Was I laughing too much? What did I do? She's mortified and devastated and walks off with her head down and tears streaming down her face as she heads off into the playground by herself. That night, she goes home and is very warmly comforted by her parents, who give her a really big pep talk, tell her how amazing she is, and the next day put her on the school bus to send her back to school. When she gets to school, the mean girl's there again, but this time she's like, "Hey, come on over. We're going to go play on the monkey bars. Do you want to play with us today?" And the little girl is like, "Oh, thank goodness. They like me today. Today is going to be a good day. I don't know what happened yesterday, but today is a good day and they like me. So yesterday must have just been a mistake." And she goes home that day, excited to be part of the group and connected again with these people, these friends, these girls that just are her world. And then she goes back to school the next day. And the mean girl says to her, "We don't like you today. Today, you're on your own. Go away. You're ugly. Go play by yourself. You can't be part of our group." And this went on for 6 years. 6 years of never knowing if she was going to be liked when she went to school, if she was going to have friends when she went to school. 6 years of doubting herself, having her self-esteem smashed, her self-worth dropped to the floor, and her sense of self-confidence eliminated. And that little girl was me. when we are little, our whole world is ego driven. Feel free to open your eyes now. You don't have to be there anymore. When we're little and we're children and we are teenagers, our entire world is driven by the world around us. It's what people say to us. It's the actions of the people around us. And we always think it's because of us. Someone doesn't like us, we take it personally. It must be something wrong with us. People think we're ugly. Oh, well, I must be ugly. And we start to form our own sense of image and self-worth and self-esteem and self-confidence, all based on our external environment. And we're never taught how to look internally for validation, internally to understand that we're here breathing and that is enough. And just because someone doesn't like us doesn't mean that we're not worth anything, that we have no value. But we don't teach that to kids. We don't teach that to girls. We don't teach it to boys. And as a result, we grow up creating the image of who we are based on what happens around us. And when we do that, we have a part of our brain called the reticular activating system. Not sure if many of you have heard of it, but it is a very powerful part of our brain. And basically, it's whatever we tell it, it believes. And we start to create all of these stories around ourselves. So we start to create stories of, I'm ugly, I'm not worth it, I have no value, people don't like me. And we start to believe that. And as a result, we start to form adaptive behaviors around how we can then interact with other people in our world. For me, I became a really big people pleaser. I say this to everyone. If you look up the definition of people pleaser in the dictionary, that'll be my picture. Yeah, I see Jamie nodding as well, right? And I'm sure a lot of us have gone through this. But not only did I become a people pleaser, I was a high achiever and a very strong controller. And all these three things, I thought, helped me to control my world, to allow me to feel connected to the people in my life. When I was a people pleaser, it meant I put everybody else first, right? If everybody wanted to go somewhere and I wanted to go somewhere else, I would go with them. I didn't put my own needs ahead of anybody else's. I always put everybody else's needs first. And as a high achiever, I learned very early that if I did well in school, my teachers and my parents were very, very supportive, and I would get the love that I so strongly deserved and needed at that time. And the controlling, well, I just tried to control everything in my life, which, as anybody knows, is a never-ending task. You can never control anything. And so as I was growing up, this is how I learned how to create connection around people, among the people around me, and the way that I started to feel connected to those. If I was people pleasing, I was part of the group. If I was high achieving, I was given really good accolades for being that person. And if I was controlling my situation, then that meant that nobody would leave and I would be part of that group. And as human beings, we thrive on connection. It is a basis for how we are. And we will do anything in our power to create that connection with the world around us. But what it also does to us when we're in these situations of feeling like we have to people please and high achieve and be a controller is we start to also live in a world of fear. Fear that we're going to be rejected. Fear that we're going to be judged. Fear that we're going to be failures at what we set our minds to do. And so we stop putting ourselves out there. We push down the little girl that we used to be. And we start fitting into all the expectations of what those around us want us to be like, so that we can continue to keep that connection. And for me, that guided my life for a very, very long time. Kelly, I believe, said something very interesting in her speech a couple of days ago around fear, that the acronym FEAR is to face everything and rise. I love that acronym. There's another one that I always like to refer back to too, is fear is false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. And when we think back to the RAS system, our reticular activating system, we've put all that false information into our brain And that's what we go off of. That's what we live our life by, is all these things that we believe about ourselves. I'm going to tell you right now are wrong. They are completely wrong. We have a lot of value. We're worth a lot, and we're perfect just the way that we are. But we don't know any better. No one's taught us how to dig into that part of ourselves. No one's taught us how to look within to get validation, and that we need to create connection within ourselves before we can create connection with other people. I want to tell you another story that happened. Well, let me just back up for a second. As we go through all of these things in our life, as we have these experiences, as you know, for myself, as we were bullied, as I was bullied and held back, and all of these things, those contribute to a lifetime of grief that we may not identify as, right? Grief starts to creep up in our lives, and if we don't address it and deal with it, it continues to percolate under the surface. So moving through my life, I had some grief experiences too. But one of the biggest things that happened, and I know Jamie kind of touched on it at the beginning with my introduction, is I've always wanted to be a mom. And since I was a little girl, I played with my dolls, played with my Barbies. I always wanted to be a mom. And so when it came time to start having kids, I thought, well, easy peasy, right? Never hear about all the problems. But it wasn't so easy. And I went through 6 years of infertility before finally falling pregnant with twins. And so we thought, great, right? We're having twins, 2-for-1 deal, right? We didn't know if they were boys, girls. We didn't care. We were just excited to find it. But as fate would have it, and I go into more detail of this in the chapter that I wrote for the book, my twins came early. I went into labor at 5.5 months. And 3 days after our twins were born, my son passed away. My daughter was the warrior. She was the one that was stable. And when that happened, I had a choice to make. I could either choose to grieve for my son, or I could choose to love my daughter. And so I chose to love her. And because you can't feel both at the same time. If you've ever tried to feel love and grief, you cannot feel them at the same time. You can flop back and forth very, very quickly, but you can never feel those emotions at the same time. And so I just pushed down my grief because she needed me. I had this little 1 pound, 3 ounce baby in the neonatal intensive care unit attached to breathing apparatuses that needed my love and my care. And for the next 6.5 months, every day I went to the hospital to sit by her side and help her thrive, ignoring my grief. Yes, it surfaced. I would cry, but I knew, well, I felt deep down inside, like a lot of people feel, you start to cry, it's never going to stop. So you stop yourself when it starts because you're like, I can't fall apart. I have a baby to look after. And so 6.5 months later, she came home on oxygen and tube feeding at 5.5 pounds. She came home like a newborn 6.5 months after she was born. And so my life then became a 24-hour focus on trying to keep her alive. And she's amazing. She's absolutely wonderful. She's going to be 15 in a few weeks. And she has become my world. But again, the grief, it was there, right? And as she grew, she knew about her brother. We talked about her brother. And then it came to a point where she understood that he had died. And so at that moment in her life, we were able to start working together about healing our own grief together. So she would cry, I would cry. We would talk about him. And over the years, that's how we dealt with Isaac's death. And I thought I was grieving. I was grieving, but I thought I had gotten over it. Which, society tells you you're going to get over grief. Big secret, big revelation, you never get over grief. Grief is a journey. It's something you go along with. And you just learn how to deal with it. So I thought I had done really well. And other things then started happening in my life. I got a divorce. I've lost jobs. I've quit jobs. We lost a business. There was other grief moments. We lost loved ones from our family. And so all of that grief that I wasn't really dealing with started building up underneath. And as Claire was saying, right, our body holds on to all those emotions. And so my body was becoming a pressure cooker. everything one after the other. And in the grief world, we call this compounded grief, right? It just builds up, and eventually you get to a point in your life where you're 40, 50 years old and you're suffering depression and anxiety and you can't sleep and you have trouble making decisions. And all these things surface and you're like, what is going on? Because you really don't understand where it comes from. For me, my pivotal moment was in 2021 when I was asked to do a TED Talk. And it was on my bucket list. I had wanted to do a TED Talk since I'd seen them on YouTube, I think in the early 2000s. And I was like, oh yes, I'm doing this. And my TED Talk was always going to be about Isaac and Lily and that journey. Because I thought if I could share the story and help one other person, then it was worth it for me. And so I sat down to start writing. That's when I realized I hadn't dealt with my grief at all. Thought I had, but I really hadn't. And as I started writing my speech, the tears started. And they started and they came. It was like floodgates had opened. I write in paper and pen. I can't type stuff on the computer or write speeches and things. My papers were soaked. And every time I would go to say my speech and practice my speech, I would not be able to get through it. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? This is a bucket list moment. I need to be able to process this and go forward. So I worked with my cousin who does EFT, and she helped me create some tools to help me work through some of it. And I'm very happy to say I did end up saying my speech, and I said it without breaking down. A few little hiccups and a little breaths, but totally understandable. But in the process of writing that speech, I did a lot of research on grief as well. And I found that our society sucks when it comes to dealing with grief. And it sucks at teaching our society how to deal with grief, right? In Latin America, they embrace that, right? They have the Day of the Dead and the community comes together and they grieve and they mourn. And it's okay to cry in the streets and it's okay to celebrate those that we lost. Here in North America, you know, if you're lucky, you get 3 days to grieve and then back to work you go. And God forbid 6 months from now, you're still crying because society doesn't know what to do. But if you go into work and you say, oh man, I am so stressed and feeling so burnt out, you're getting high fives all around. You're getting a badge of honor. And people are racing to you to say, oh yeah, me too, man. Oh man, the workload's so hard. If you came into the office and I said, hey, Jamie, you know what? I'm really feeling sad today. I'm really missing my son. Odds are, if you weren't you, Jamie, but if it was somebody else, people tend to back away from you. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. And they don't know what to do because we have not taught people what to do. And so really, I'll give you a couple of pointers. It isn't really the point of the speech, but a couple of pointers, just sit with them, let them talk, let them be, just be there for them. But through the process of researching all of this, I got a big fire in my belly to get out and start educating people around grief. And that's what it started. So I started writing for a couple of magazines. I started doing workshops, educating people on how to deal with grief and what it is and what it isn't. And it became a life of its own, I guess. And so using my own healing journey as the basis for going forward and educating as well, and everything that I learned, I then started coaching women who were going on their healing grief journey, women who were ready to start taking those steps forward. And as Cheryl said in her talk yesterday, we all have a choice. We have a choice in how we live, we breathe, we connect, and we also have a choice in how we breathe. In the throes of grief, we may not think that we do, but we really, really do. We can choose to stay in our grave and wallow and live the pain over and over and over again. And sometimes we feel stuck in that place that we don't have a choice to move forward. Whether we stay there out of guilt or shame or resistance or fear of what was life going to be, if I move forward, it's still a choice. We choose to stay in it or we choose to start moving forward. And moving forward doesn't mean that we forget or that we don't feel the sadness anymore. It means we're making intentional choices to step forward and make our life matter, give us something to go forward on, give ourselves more joy. And a lot of us can't do that because we feel guilty, especially if it's grief over the loss of a spouse or a child or even a parent. Sometimes we don't feel that we deserve to be happy because they're no longer here with us. So we stay stuck. A lot of the work that I do with the women that I work with is teaching them how to take back their power, teaching them how to step into their own power. And we use the word empowerment a lot. And that term empowerment tends to be thrown around a lot within the coaching world. And as I sat with it and thought about it, I actually help the women that I'm with get even further than empowered. I help them become unshakable. It's so much more than just standing in power. And it's a term that my colleague Leah and I coined this summer when we were creating another venture, which I can mention a little bit later to you. But unshakable became the word for us. It was stronger, had more depth than just being empowered. And for us, being unshakable is knowing and accepting yourself fully and completely, warts and all. It's being comfortable being your authentic self all the time, not just at work, not just at home, not just with your friends, but all the time. You get to be your goofy, awkward, funny, smart, determined, shy, outgoing self. It doesn't matter who you are. You just embody that. And that's who you present to the world, and that's who you are. I'll tell you, it saves all the guessing and trying to figure out who you need to be in any situation. But being unshakable also allows you to possess the ability to recognize and believe in your strengths and your unique qualities, and what you bring to the world. And you get to face your fears head on and do it scared anyway. We live in fear all the time. All of us have fears. Whether we're afraid of rejections, judgment, failure, success, we live in fears. But if we can face those fears and do it anyway, I'll tell you, you're well on your way to becoming unshakable. And some of the benefits of becoming unshakable is you get to let go of being the people pleaser. And you get to know what's important to you, not afraid to ask for it. You fiercely go after your dreams. You fully acknowledge, accept, and express your emotions. That is like the key to becoming unshakable. And you can confidently handle any challenges that can throw at you, because we're all going to have them. Just because we get to the point of being unshakable doesn't mean life is just, all roses and smooth sailing. It teaches you how to deal with the tough stuff. And you get to a point where you can truly feel joy, love, and happiness again. You make room for that space in your life, knowing that happiness comes from within you, not your environment, not what people tell you. It comes from you. And you also know that you're not defined what other people think of you. What other people think of you is none of your business. That is probably my favorite quote ever. What other people think of you, none of your business. It's what you think of yourself. And you also end up attaining this beautiful place of inner peace. One of the things that I have created recently that you're all welcome to go and download off my website is the 10 tips for becoming unshakable. And today I'm going to share 3 of them. I'm very conscious of time. I'll share 3 of them with you, and then we'll be able to wrap up. The first one is really correctly identifying and acknowledging your emotions. If you're afraid, be afraid. If you're sad, be sad. But if you're sad, also ask yourself, am I frustrated or disappointed? Like, what's really under there? If you can correctly identify and acknowledge your emotions, you are the first step on moving into being unshakable. The next thing is, once you've identified these emotions, you need to give yourself permission to feel them. Quite often, we judge ourselves on emotions that we have. Say a very close family member was suffering from cancer for a long time, and then they pass, and you're grieving, but part of you feels relief because their suffering is over, but now yours is over as well on that level. But God forbid you say to someone, I feel relieved. And then you judge yourself for feeling relieved, and then you feel guilty for feeling relieved, for feeling all of those feelings, and you push them down. I'm telling you, don't do that. Give yourself permission to feel them. You don't need to say them out loud to everybody, but you do need to give yourself permission to feel them. And the third thing is to have the courage to be vulnerable in this state. Sharing vulnerability forges connection. It allows you to connect with others on such a deep level. And it's actually letting people see who you are at your deepest core. You get to be your authentic self. And if you can get into that state, being unshakable, you are going to find yourself at a sense of peace, and you're definitely making more room for joy and happiness. I have a mantra that I have on my wall that says, I empower women to feel so worthy that they can't help but live a life of joy and passion. And that's where I am now in my life, that I have found myself at a place of being unshakable. Things still topple a little, but I can get back up. And
repeat your mantra, please.
Sure. The mantra, I empower women to feel so worthy that they can't help but live a life of joy and passion.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you so much for having me here today. And I really, really am grateful for having the opportunity to share my message with all of you about how to become unshakable. Thank you.
Can't hear me yet, but yay! Awesome. Oh my gosh. Wow. Telling your story without crying is, how do you do that? Like, so much practice.
Deep breathing. There was a few little hiccups, but yeah, a lot of deep.
Woo. Beautiful, beautiful, absolutely gorgeous story. Very well told. Love the thing that stuck out for me was how that compounded grief, we have one thing after the other after the other. It ends up creating, I think Cindy Rose referenced the rose in, like, it almost makes us sink back into the bud state of who we are, and we have to release the grief in order to blossom into the beautiful being that we are. Whew. Wow. Wow. Any questions or comments for sweet Margaret? Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for telling your story.
Just wanted to thank you, Margaret, for telling your story. I know you listened to my presentation Friday, and as soon as you started talking about the little girl, I started sobbing as I was sitting here, because that was me, and it sounds like it was a lot of people. And I just loved how we do resonate with our brains, and we believe what our brain is telling us. And for a long time, I did that. And I remember even, going through therapy, and I'm a coach now, the version we create in our head is sometimes so much worse than what it is in reality.
Yeah, I loved your chat, your presentation. Resonate with that too.
Absolutely. We'll have to chat more. So I love that.
Yay, wonderful. Yeah, and just to throw this out there, I'm wholeheartedly impressed with you referencing, I think, almost every single speaker that has gone so far. That in and of itself shows your dedication to truly honoring who you are at your core spirit, just being willing to listen to and be in the state of grace with everybody else's presentation. So I so much appreciate that. So very much appreciate that. All right.